we wrote the original guidelines for the use of non-sexist language at the University of the West Indies for a twofold reason. Language, as you would be aware, reinforces prejudices that exist in the public at large. And there are many, many terms in the English language which are prejudicial with regard to gender. Also, there had been a tremendous change which the language had not kept up with. So there had been a 100-fold increase in the number of women in the workforce in the second 50 years of the 20th century. But yet the terms that were used within the work sphere to refer to women were always male-based. The obvious examples being such terms as master of ceremonies, chairman, and so on. But over the years, or very quickly in fact, we realized that there had been quite a gap in the guidelines. First of all, we very much wanted to include items which were specific to the Caribbean context. And secondly, the language was morphing very, very fast with respect to references to different sexualities. And particularly in our own Caribbean context, it was important for us to bring those terms on board appropriately. So, 4 reasons at the point we came to for a new version, which is coming out as we speak.
Indeed, indeed. And the new version, with that purpose and goal and objective in mind, we did some research, a survey, and the survey was done on the campus, and we tested one aspect, which was the concept of Ms. as a title in comparison to Mrs. and Miss. And we found that many people who were Mrs. wanted to retain that title, and even though Ms. had already entered into common parlance throughout the world, many people in Trinidad didn't understand what Ms. meant. We also did an interview, a series of interviews with women from different socioeconomic and professional background, and they were able to discuss and explain what they understood sexism and sexist language to be, and what they felt was needed to address it. And the 2 themes were that sexist language was in fact derogatory terms, and that what was needed was consciousness raising and attitude change. And the derogatory terms came in as it relates to different sexualities and sexual identities as well, because they too are addressed with these derogatory terms. So realize that we needed to highlight all of these things that became apparent through the survey, and so that's the new part of the guideline.
I think we honestly recognize an improvement with respect to the use of these terms. In some areas there has been very slow change, and we find constantly that even those of us who are gender aware still use the old terms in some unfortunate ways. We do find that despite advances and despite a greater consciousness, particularly in formal spheres, some of the old terms still persist in the informal. And I could give an example of my own usage, which really hit me recently when I was talking to applaud a female who had led a service provision trip in St. Lucia. I said, referring to her in the third persons, "Congratulations for your masterminding this trip. You really did a tremendous job." And then immediately I stopped and I laughed and I said, "Mistress minded," writing all of this down. You know, it immediately strikes you, the disjunct between master and mistress, that mistress has all those negative connotations that we don't associate with the term master. So then this set up a little interaction in social media where she eventually said, "Okay, well, why don't we say madam minded?" And then that had its own set of problems to it. So I think in that kind of atmosphere where we still spontaneously make mistakes and then tumble upon the pejorative terms that are still in use, it is good to keep conscious even for those of us who are gender aware, much less those who may be less.
Indeed, and I mean, just in terms of the pejorative or discriminatory terms, just as to make visible, you know, in Trinidad we say very loosely, men use it to women, sometimes even women use it, terms like chicks and birds and things and you know, horse and whatever it may be, which are animal type terms. Then of course you have obscene terms, but what was interesting on campus was the use of the term girls, where girls, which is, you know, seemingly harmless, made them feel that it was diminishing their adulthood, so they didn't like being called girls. So that was another interesting discovery, and hopefully as people read the book they would know, okay, let me be aware of the language, not only other, but used by myself. And that is where we went in terms of that attitude change and consciousness raising effort.
I think that there was a difference in the tone in which we wrote the guidelines this time, because we had written it in the first instance as descriptive, but also in a sense prescriptive, and many people actually said they were glad of that and being glad to be simply directed. But it's clearly not a subject on which one can really be prescriptive. And so, as much as anything with the issue of this version, we want also to start a dialogue with the university community. We ourselves will be doing more research, and at a point we'll be ready to host perhaps an informal exchange where people come to the table and see how they find following our guidelines or not, explain their reasons why or why not, and take us a little further along this research path.